Are you a radio enthusiast?
A research student?
Or a curious thinker looking for an adventure?
If this sounds like you, welcome to
the 4th episode of
The Summer I Found My Spark, a podcast where we interview Adelphi's brightest minds to learn about their summer research experience. We'll be asking students how they could discover their topic, reached out to mentors, the setbacks they faced, and the advice that they have for future research students. My name is Maci.
And I'm Errah. Today's episode is brought to you in collaboration with the Sparks Research Center, where curiosity meets innovation. Each summer, the Sparks Center funds students to take on independent research projects across various disciplines.
Whether you're interested in computer science, dance, literature, or public health, there is something for every listener with a curious take on life. So keep your ears sharp, for this podcast might just leave you inspired or searching for your own spark. To find out more, please visit the Sparks Instagram page and website linked in our description. Today we're joined by Keara Malazarte, a pre-med senior in the Honors College majoring in molecular neuroscience with a minor in public health, and Dr. Shana Caro, an assistant professor of biology who did her PhD in zoology and animal biology at the University of Oxford.
Dr. Caro has spent most of her career researching dynamics between bird parents and their offspring. Keara and I have been part of Dr. Caro's lab since our sophomore years, and this summer we were chosen as Sparks Fellows to conduct behavioral research on ants and birds. Let's hear more from them. How are you both doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. And you, Dr. Caro?
Doing great. It's nice. We're rounding up the semester.
That's so exciting. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. So let's talk a little bit about birds at Adelphi. So I know Adelphi has a surprisingly rich bird population, but I'm not really familiar with it myself. So for all of our non-STEM, non-bird listeners, Keara and Dr. Caro, could you paint a picture of what the animal research looks like and what inspired you both to pursue this field?
All right, well, I'll take this one on birds. In my lab, we look at birds both in the wild and then also in the lab, and we do that in collaboration with Dr. Kaya Provost's lab as well. So for birds on campus, we've actually had a bunch of sort of secret microphones up around campus for the last year. Don't worry, it only records at dawn, and we've been catching all of the bird song that's happening for the hour just around dawn, which is when they do their chorus and sing. And through that, we're able to use machine learning, and so we actually now can identify all of the different species that are present on campus, and we've got over 150 different bird species confirmed on campus, which is a lot. And we're using that information to look at things like how human activity affects what the birds are doing. And then within my lab, we also work with chickens, and I have a few students working on how chickens make choices, which is one of the main focuses of my lab, which is just decision making and how that occurs. And Keara is working on decision making, but in a slightly different milieu.
Yeah, so I don't really work with birds. I've worked a little bit on the chickens with kind of like helping to take care of them. But what I study are ants. It's a pretty unconventional model system because a lot of the questions that I get as a student researcher is like, why did you choose ants? Especially as a pre-med, like, why didn't you choose something like disease or bacteria, stuff like that. What I really find interesting about ants is even though they're such small insects, they actually display really complex decision-making abilities because they make decisions as a colony rather than an individual ant. So I'm trying to see these different factors such as the size of the colony, the age of the workers, and how that affects the entire colony decision on a group level.
I think one of our conversations around ants were one of our first ones when we were going about ant credit. For this podcast, and I found out it has over 28 weekly visits. it's fascinating, but also made my screen crawl because I don't like ants. Keara, your research, as Professor Caro mentioned, is about collective decision-making in ant colonies. Could you describe the physical process of working with ants, and are they nice research models?
So working with ants, I started off in sophomore year just reading about them, and I got really interested in them because, again, like what I was saying before, you really see them on your daily walks and like, oh, it's a little ant, or sometimes you step on it. And it wasn't until after I was reading it that I got really interested in them. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like, you all decide, like thousands and thousands of workers decide to move to to a new place all as one group. But I didn't get to start working with them until the summer of 2024. And I ended up going to the Cranauer lab at the Rockefeller University. And to give some background to them, they're a really big ant researching group. They study everything from genetics to molecular biology to chemistry to neuroscience, and all on ants. So I was there as an intern, and I had no idea how to work with ants before this, and they kind of just gave me my own colony of technically invasive ants from India and said, do whatever you want with them. So yeah, something that you don't really know until it happens is you'd never underestimate your research model, especially if they're animals, because the amount of times I've accidentally let ants out. When I was at Rockefeller, I think I let out maybe 500 ants.
Oh, God.
And it's really bad because those ants, like I said, were technically invasive if they got into our ecosystem. I was working with evacuation behaviors. So if they get scared, they're going to try to evacuate. So they found a hole and they evacuated. And obviously this is a really well-funded lab, multi-million-dollar lab. So they obviously had all these precautions and everything. They had these really expensive rooms where locked, humidity controlled, everything like that. With the system I was working with, all those ants, a majority of them died because the heat barriers that would immediately kill them if they were to escape. But yeah, that was a scare. And I thought, when I came back, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be working with ant species that are native to New York. I don't have to worry about working with thousands and thousands of ants. I'm going to be working with colony sizes of maybe at most 100, 150. And then I went to the lab earlier today and I realized that a colony got out. So,
oh no,
yeah.
Not again.
Yeah, so the good thing is that the science building is not really the best well controlled in terms of humidity and temperature. So if they ever do get out, they're probably, they won't survive long, but yeah, it was crazy. And they also left their queen again. We had this colony. We've had, this is a recurring issue with some of the ants colonies that we've been keeping here, where all the workers will leave, but they'll leave the queen behind. So it's not going to go anywhere because an ant colony can't survive without their queen.
That makes sense. Is that why, if you find one ant in your room or in your house, 2 days later there are gonna be a ton of them, a whole colonies, because they make this collective decision?
Yes, actually. So what's really interesting about ants and their decision making is a lot of them will follow positive and negative feedback. So for example, let's say an individual worker finds food in your room, it's gonna go back to its colony. It's going to tell the other workers via chemical pheromones or little touches they make with their antennas. And more workers are going to go out and, see the food. And this cycle kind of repeats. The more workers say hey, there's food here, the more ants are going to come and try to collect that food.
That's so interesting. So you've had a lot of unpredictable experiences then. It's very interesting. I'm glad you're getting some good stories out of it at least. Dr. Caro, how about you? Have you had any unpredictable experiences when it comes to birds?
Sure. I mean, the chickens were kind of fun last year. It was the first time I've worked with chickens, and we got day-old chickens. They were shipped through the mail, so we got a box of cheeping little baby chicks. Oh. Super cute. And, we weren't really sure exactly how long it would take them to develop, and what we were doing is having them solve puzzles. So we made a little cardboard arena where they would have to pick, stimulus 1 or stimulus 2, and the first 2 weeks it was fine, but then by like the third week they could start to fly. And so they could just opt out of doing the experiment and just fly out of that arena right at our faces, which was extremely startling.
That's funny, unpredictable for sure.
Keara, what has your experience been as a part of Dr. Keara's lab over the 2 years that you've been a part of? And Dr. Keara, you have about 4 to 5 students in your lab, including myself. How has your... So Keara, you've been part of Dr. Keara's lab for about 3 years now. And Dr. Keara, you've had 6 lab members in your lab. What has the experience been for you, Keara, working with a mentor and then Dr. Keara working with your lab members?
I can start. So one of the fun things about doing research at Adelphi with Adelphi students is that they're really interested and curious, and they have so many different intellectual passions. And so I have 6 students, but they're not all working on the same projects. We have people working on things as diverse as ants. And Errah, we haven't even talked about the kind of research that we do, which is looking at how mothers basically program their offspring to develop in different ways based on how stressed they are before they lay their eggs. And what's great is that students here at Adelphi have all of these different interests, and they can do these different projects all together in my lab. It's so much fun supervising them.
Yeah, so for me, I actually never really liked research. Back in high school, I was part of a science research program, and just as I was about to get my own mentor there, COVID hit. So I never really got that opportunity. And coming out of high school, my freshman year, I started to miss research a lot. And that's when I realized I actually took it for granted when I was in high school. So reaching out to Dr. Caro and joining her lab was just the experience I never got to have. And it really helped me to grow beyond of what I already knew. So I already knew stuff like the scientific method and how to write scientifically. But for example, like cold emailing Dr. Cronauer and being able to join his lab, I would never have had the confidence if Dr. Caro never guided me. And I feel like I'm very fortunate in the sense that I have a lot of autonomy in the lab. Like I get to kind of choose where my project gets to go and kind of learn a lot about independency and kind of working around all these obstacles like ants escaping and kind of thinking outside of the box and adding to the science that is already out there in the world. So that's been a lot of fun.
I also know you also mentioned that you're a pre-med. How has your current research shaped your creative or academic interests and your aspirations in medicine?
So yeah, being a pre-med and studying ants is not always the most well received by other pre-meds, is what I've learned. But I feel like a lot of times I've kind of, at least ever since my sophomore year, I've kind of grown to accept that it's not necessarily the research topic itself and more so the skills that I picked up from it. And I think from just researching in general and really diving deep into a topic and learning the ins and outs of it has really inspired me to kind of pursue a career in medicine that lets me kind of integrate research into my daily life. So after my undergrad, I plan to pursue an MD PhD. And this is basically a degree where I get both an MD and a PhD within the course of 8 years. And what I really love about this career pathway is that it lets me be both a doctor, at least like once or twice a week, but then spend the rest of my time being a full-time researcher. So kind of doing basic science work in a disease and then later going on into a clinic and treating patients of the same disease or similar pathogens. Yeah.
And I'll also add to that, a lot of my students in the lab are pre-med. And what med schools want to see with research experiences is not sort of plug and chug where a student just like pipettes things that their professor told them to pipette. They want to see that you're independent, that you're a thinker, that you can follow a project from start to finish. And you can do that with anything, ants as well as human diseases.
That is so interesting. I've never heard of that pathway before. That's I think that's quite aspirational that you're pursuing both of those at once. Okay, so on this show, we'd like to talk about the oh no moments that happen during research because there are a lot of them. And I would assume that especially in animal research where you're dealing with lots of external variables, that this would be pretty common. So the project you spent weeks working on gets shot down. The results you're hoping to get backfire. But as we know, failure is a fundamental piece of research success. We've spoken about the scientific method and how that is developed through research. So have you had any oh no moments during your research together, during your working on your projects, and how do you deal with those rejections and setbacks?
I think oh no moments, yeah. Working with animals, you always have an oh no moment. You can't plan too much because they're going to do what they're going to do. And one of the things that we've actually been dealing with recently is Keara's original project we were going to be doing was going to be looking at colonies before and after their soldier cast emerged. And we thought that we had like 3 months before any soldiers showed up. And then what did you see?
It was like a week later, not even a week later, they started coming out. And it's just, you can't expect them to be like, okay, you got 3 months and then you start doing this. They'll do it when they feel ready. Yeah. So
I wanted to do the experiment over intercession, and the ants said, no, thank you. We'd like to start now.
Yeah.
So how do you mentally overcome that obstacle in the heat of the moment during the academic semester? I know that it can be a lot.
So what was really funny is that when we were planning the experiment with one of our collaborators over in Mexico, we actually came up with a whole bunch of backup plans. So all of our backup plans had backup plans, and that's why my thesis is on like a really cool experiment on starvation, and seeing if we starve these ant colonies, would that affect their self-defense behaviors? And then later on we can go maybe and revisit the original experiment. But when you're on a time crunch and you have like 5 exams the next day, that's why we make backup plans.
Well, we have one final question for you. There are many students who are and will be working on their Sparks applications, their honors senior theses, and their capstone projects, and all other types of research. Dr. Caro, do you have any tips and tricks for students who want to pursue research but don't know where to start?
Don't be afraid to talk to your professors. We love doing research with students. That's part of why we decided to become professors at Adelphi. So I would say just, find out when a professor's office hours are and just show up and say, I'm interested in research. Do you have any space in your lab? This is why I think it's cool. You can also send that as an email. And again, we get these emails. We are like excited and looking forward to them. And I think, you don't have to have a project figured out beforehand. You can just have a general idea that you want to do this kind of work and then reach out to the professor.
And Keara, if you could rewind back to your freshman year, to the beginning of your research journey, what are some wisdoms you would impart on yourself?
Some of the wisdom is just like, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give myself and like everyone is that the worst they can say is no. One of my regrets is actually not asking to join a lab earlier, because I actually did cold email Dr. Caro after Dr. Hobby said that you were a new professor here. So I kind of regret being a little bit scared at the beginning. Never be scared to just kind of reach out to people, because the worst they can say is no. Yeah.
We're not really mean. We're just nice professors.
Yeah.
Yes, you're academics. That's your whole thing. Right?
Exactly.
You would be so surprised to hear how many people come in and give that feedback. I think every person we've interviewed on this show have said, don't be afraid to reach out, and I wish I would have done it sooner. So I guess that kind of goes to show that it's such a transformative experience for so many different people. And come on, be brave. You can do it, right? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for your time and for sharing your story of dedication and resilience with our listeners. If you have any questions about Keara's project or would like to collaborate, you can contact her via her email, which is included in our episode description.
And thank you to the Sparks Research Center for sponsoring this episode and continuing to support student innovation across campus. If you want to learn more about how to get involved with Sparks or apply for next summer's program, check out their page on the university website. We'll link it in the episode description.
And that wraps up today's episode of PAWS Radio. Until next time, stay tuned and stay curious. We'll catch you in our next episode of The Summer I Found My Spark.